And I think we got it covered. So that's it for kind of an overview of MDA. And so now we would just like to really take kind of your questions about the blended learning program. All right. Yeah. Yeah, we need the, I can't hear.
Hi, I really don't like microphones, but you said that you had 3 groups, the horses, the monkeys, and the lions, right? And then you mentioned something about sticky colors, the green and the blue. Can you explain that more, because I still can't visualize?
So what I do is I have the option of doing basically 2 separate models of a station rotation. There's a 3-station model, and that's about like every 20 minutes, you know, computer, teacher, either with my TA or an independent station. And that would be the approximately 20 minutes, lights flash, and then they go to the next station. And again, I have to train the kids for about 2 weeks on how to move and what it should look like. And then I also do two separate stations. And that's why I use the 2 different color sticky notes, so that the students know, oh, I'm in the green group, or oh, I'm in the blue group. And these are about like 30-minute stations. And this is where I do like a science group and book clubs, where my students are getting like rich literature content that they won't get on the computers, that they get with me. And then they do that little penguin math program that they love. That's when they do that. So it's basically, yeah, you can do 2 different station options. And I basically separate it by either animal groups or color groups.
If I understand well, I think you said that you use the rotation model the most. There are 6 blended learning types of teaching. It's face-to-face, rotation, flex, online lab, self-learned, online driver. Depending what you want to do with the student, or depending the class. Like I read yesterday in math class, not all the blended learning styles are the best. You have to differentiate depending on the skills you want to teach. If it's better to use rotation, if it's better to use flex, if it's better to use face-to-face. I would like to know why then you choose only to use rotation, if I understand it well.
You guys are in a very kind of, for us, luxurious position, because all of your kids have computers. So you're able to do all the different models. We don't get that. Our students, we have basically a station, and I am limited to 15 computers, and some of them don't work, and so then it's sometimes 14 computers. So I am kind of pigeonholed to doing the station rotation, and I've had to, you know, in the 4 years, have to figure out how it works best for me. When I started, I just did 2 groups. Now I've figured out how to do 3 groups. But like I said, you guys are in a very nice position because all of your students have computers, so you can really play around with all of these different models and see how you can do it for specific lessons, to see what works best for your group of students. So that's why I've had to basically go with the station rotation model.
Well, the middle school has Chromebooks, and so I have a little bit more flexibility, and I do use that. My groups are completely fluid. I have the novels we read, and that's their name, but they might not stay in that group while I'm teaching. I could say, okay, I'm going to work with you 4, come over here. And I do that. So I do have a little bit more flexibility. So the groups do move around. The only thing I haven't tried was like the flipped classroom. maybe that's my next year goal. I don't know, but I haven't tried that. Everything else I've kind of rotated through, and I use different groupings regularly. They're fluid, very fluid.
I have another question. Sometimes you have, I think you talk about it, but I want to hear a little bit more. Sometimes in the classroom you have some students that it's really difficult to engage in computers or engage in the class because attitude, they have different attitude to school. They see school in different ways. That the United States culture is not the same as the Puerto Rican culture. How can you engage that student that doesn't like to work, wants to do the list? He goes to school for a grade, that's all. And if you don't engage it and you are rotating or any other style, it's gonna be disrupting your classroom. And also, I think it will not grow or develop in the course because he's gonna be getting back and back and back.
Let me make sure I'm answering this right. There are students that aren't engaged. So, middle school, it can be challenging. It's not the high engagement years on literature. And I know that. So, because my groups are flexible, I will have a group of 6. And it's really hard to avoid me when I'm sitting next to you. Like, I'm at a table with 6 kids. And I strategize how I'm going to do it. It might not even be on their reading level. It's like, I know this kid needs an extra push. So I'm going to be next to them, and I'm going to push them. So they might not be engaged on the computers as much as I would like, but I know for half of my class period, he or she is being nudged by me. And I also engage the parents. Like, I have a program, it's called Remind, and they like have a chat service. So I've actually used that this year in the middle of class. I'm like, hey, I'm gonna like basically text your mom. It's gonna be delivered to her. She's gonna help me. Get up. Why didn't you go to bed on time? And you know what? That kind of works. Like, and I've taught for a long time, and I taught to a class of 30, and I might have missed that kid. But in my group of 6, I'm not missing him anymore. That's what I really like. I mean, they might not like it, but and they're having fun actually in reality because every kid is talking. I'm like, hey, I know you haven't answered. It's your turn. So, does that answer it?
And I have something.
Okay.
That kid isn't going anywhere. They're still going to be with you. I have a little girl, and she could really care less about how she's doing on the computer. And I will point to the sticky chart, and I'll say, Billy, and her sticker line is all the way over here. And she doesn't care. And I have to, figure out ways to be like, if I see you're disengaged, I have a lot of the programs that you use will have practice pages for you to print out, and I'll print out some practice pages that go along with what she should be doing on the computer. And I have a packet of her in the religion area, and she just now, when she's done with the computer, just will go into the area and do some work, and then she finishes there and then goes back onto the computer. But she doesn't care, and I do have consequences for students who are playing around and everything, and she gets benched, and other students will get benched for, not following the rules in the computer. But like Michelle said, the real key to those students is then those moments with you, where they get you in that small group time, and with me, she's very engaged. It's just on the computer, she doesn't like it. And I have other students that, will have their bad days and will be like, you know what, I need to go do a different math choice. And you kind of have to be flexible with that and understand with that. But At the same time, give consequences for it, and let your administrator know. Hey, I'm having a hard time with this student. Let the parents know. Hey, this student disengages. This student shows low time on task. But they're not going anywhere. Sorry.
Okay, I have a couple of quick questions, yes or no answers. Most others need a little further explanation. Do you use the Common Core route? Do you have Common Core?
Yes.
What's the name of the standard test you use to measure your students? Is it like a state standard test?
You're asking about the standardized exam we use. We use the NWEA MAP assessments. It's an adaptive. It's all computer based. It's an adaptive exam.
For language also?
It's it's NWEA is the organization. I believe it's the Northwest Education Association. The exam itself is called the MAP test. It's an acronym for something, I forget. But we give it. It's a Common Core based national exam, and it's adaptive. Meaning that the kids aren't taking don't have all the same questions like you do on a paper and pencil exam, where they're taking the computer, depending on how you answer the questions, it determines what question to give you next to really kind of focus in on your level and where your achievement level is.
I was going to answer that question. The MAP test is being used in Colombia, in the U.S., in private schools are adopting it all over the world.
Mm-hmm. And we are able to give it 3 times a year, actually. So we give it, beginning and end of the year. We also do a mid-year assessment in January, just as sort of a benchmark measure of how kids are doing in progressing toward their goals. It gives us goal. It gives, based on how they do in the fall, it produces goals, which we can adjust as we want, but it will produce goals for the kids for the end of the year. And that's really nice because it gives us something to talk about with the kids. So kids are actually engaged. Before, in standardized tests I've given before, there was no engagement or discussion or anything with kids about it. So anyway, they get the result. They get their goals for the year. The kids know what their goals for the year. The parents know what the goals are for the year. The mid-year assessment gives them a little indication of how they're doing toward meeting their goals. And then we also use that mid-year assessment. We do some analysis as a staff of that data. They do analysis of their class, where they are, because in the exam we'll break things down into discrete sort of skill sets. And then they can really see where their kids fall, both in terms of skill set and it puts them into quartiles. And so we have a discussion that we do as a staff about that, so that their teachers are taking a look at their classroom and their kids and seeing what's going on and what they need to do.
Do most schools that are using the blended program, are they taking that test? Do you know about that?
I honestly couldn't tell you.
Okay.
I don't know.
Are you guys self-contained, or are you?
We're self-contained through 6th grade, 7th and 8th grade. We switch.
All right. Okay. What kind of conduct system do you guys use? Do you use like for behavior in the classroom because I think that if you're kind of how do I put this, modernizing, right, an area of your school, I feel also that you kind of have to update, the traditional maybe grade system, conduct system. So I'm not sure how you guys go about it.
So you mean like a general discipline plan for
this? We do it as a 1, 2. We have numbers for like if you're like an excellent student, you behave super, then you get a 5. And then your borderline if you get a 3.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I would say ours is pretty standard and typical in that way. Like on their report card, there is that citizenship part of the grade where at some levels, at the older levels, it's like 1 through 4. At the primary grades, it's a little more, it's a little more broken down into discrete kind of actions and stuff and it's all on the report card that we use. But that piece, to be honest, hasn't changed with our blended learning. It's what it is.
Use like citizenship. They went like the citizenship kit, and they have like different kinds of personal.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. But do you want to say something?
In the middle school, since it's different teachers, actually I have it's right across the hall from me, but we have a Google Doc that we share and keep up for keeping track of like bathroom visits and behavior problems. So we're always literally on the same page. So I know what student A was doing in Mr. A's classroom, and he knows what student B was doing in mine if there's an issue. So there is a consequence for an action, and we're on the same page. So okay, you're going to be upstairs at lunch with me. I see that Mr. A already talked to you, or you've already went to the bathroom once today. So we're very structured, and we constantly communicate, via the Google Docs, and we also talk to each other occasionally. But the Google Doc throughout the day really helps us.
Yeah, one.
I'm asking because I feel that when you have these kind of systems, it's very hard to penalize the kid if they're walking around and just talking to each other while they're kind of, transitioning to the next stage. You know what I mean? So how do you measure that?
Well, in the middle school,
they kind of have to talk to each other if they're doing project-based learning. So, you know what I mean? So how do you measure?
Well, I have different tables, and it's all about like setting the expectation of what is allowed in my classroom. So there's different noise level. The group I'm with, I want to be the loudest because we're supposed to be talking. If you're in a small group, I shouldn't hear you, and I'll put you somewhere that you're the farthest away from me, and I can still see them obviously, but they have a noise level. And if you're on computers independently, I don't want to hear you at all. And my transitions, the middle school is we have a long day. So in the transitions, I don't really mind if they chat a little bit. And I have like a time, I'm like, okay, you have a 1-minute transition. And if that's their moment to kind of talk and move on, as long as they're in the right spot, I'm okay with that because they don't have a break. So it's nice for them to get up and move around and literally, I do time it about a minute, 30 seconds top. That's not a bad transition because they're putting books away, getting books, moving to different tables, getting their Chromebooks. So there's a lot of movement. So I try to let them have a little bit of, as long as it's not loud and they're moving.
And here, one of the things before you is what you said about setting expectations. What we've seen in many other schools is that in those first 2 weeks of the year, in which you create the routines, the expectations, the protocols, the processes, that's when you say this is allowed and this is not allowed in each station and while you're transitioning. And then once they know what the rules are, then you deal with the discipline grading.
Well, and I also actually have a program, it's called Hapara, and I can send them messages directly to their computer. So if I see someone distracted, I can say, Glenn, stop talking. And then he looks up, he's like, oh no. Or if a group is too loud, I might send it and I'm like, I can hear you.
Can you repeat the name of the program?
Hapara, Hapara. And it just pops up and they can't respond to me. They could email me, but it just lets them know. I'm like, I'm right here. And I can also see what they're doing online, and I could close out pages that I don't want them at, or I could open up pages for them. So I'm kind of spying on them. If I'm not there that day, I still check on my iPhone. And I've actually texted my sub and be like, hey, Ryan's on YouTube. And I close him out, and then he gets in trouble twice. Right? I'm like, it's all about engaging. They're going to try, and it's just me catching them and letting them know I'm always kind of spying on them.
Okay, let me, there's a couple of hands, and I just want to make sure that they're hands for the discipline part, because we have one question that is not related to discipline, or that is a discipline question. Okay, so let's go here.
Thank you for all your help. I think you're being really useful. However, I teach specifically 11th graders and a group in 9th grade, but regarding to staying engaged and disciplined, we're concerned, some teachers are concerned that they might go into other programs, etc. Do you have a specific program that you lock that out in some way, maybe?
The admin has power to block out certain things, and the kids have powers to break through them. But you know what? They're held accountable for everything they're doing. So if I'm not as flexible as the lower grades, like they have assignments, like you have to read this novel, you have an exam, there's an accountability. Not Facebook as much. Mostly they want to listen to music while they're doing their work. That's our big one. But if they know that I'm watching, there's only so much they can do. And also, there are certain kids, since I am flexible, I can have them sit at an angle that I can see their screen too. So they can't minimize it fast enough because they're right there and I could kind of glance over and they know I'm watching. So they're just different strategies. Like some kids I know I'll never have to check and that's fine. And there's some kids that I'm like, all right, I'm going to look because you're going to try and I'm going to try to catch you. Yeah, that's through the Hapara program. So I can pull up and see everything they're on, and I can X out. And you can see when it happens because their heads pop up. Okay.
Yeah, and one of the things, one of the workshops that you're going to get, I believe is in August, is a specific one for classroom management and classroom tools for management, managing discipline. So there's some things that the administration is going to do at the firewall level, and there's some things that you have to do. So.
Yeah, I just want to say, really, I believe it's a two-pronged approach. One is technological, like what Jaime is saying about, at that level and firewalls and everything and monitoring that. But the other is culture. And I think that what I've noticed is at the beginning, 4 years ago, there was much more trying to play around, trying to do things. We see very little of it. You still watch it. You got to watch from time to time. But I would say now I would describe it as isolated incidents from time to time. And because again, it's a culture of number one. After a while, having that technology and that ability, you get used to it, and it's not that the kids are like it's not that special, and they're not so interested in trying to do that kind of stuff. But what's one thing that I've noticed that is kind of remarkable, and I hadn't thought about before, but the kids just have learned how to be responsible users of technology, just like all of us with our cell phones when you have it all the time, and you learn how to use it for different purposes. You learn how to use it for work versus your personal life. And the kids, over time, over these years, have really learned for themselves, when it's at school and they have the technology in their hand, they use it for their academic purposes for the most part. And then when school's out and they go out into the yard, they power up and they do what they do socially, and they text each other even though they're 5 feet apart. But
So one of the things that some teacher was asking is, how do you deal with homework? Because we're talking what's going on during the day. Do you have homework? How much homework do you have? How you intertwine homework with technology? How does that work for you guys?
Well, in the middle school, I tried to, not all of our students have access at home. So I do try to make the assignments online doable within the 40-minute that they have. And then they have like the traditional homework based on my groups. And then if they don't use their time effectively, then that online turns into homework. But ideally, they can finish their online work in class. And that's my goal. And then they have the more traditional still with me. But I still send reminders every day, like don't forget your novel on curriculum, because you might not use it all the way best in class. So you might have to catch up. Yeah.
So my students in most of the younger grades, we do like the regular packet. You have the I send mine Friday, they get it Friday, they return it Friday. They have their regular packet that we're all used to. But then I'm also able to, for students that do have the online access, I'm able to assign certain things from the computer programs, and I assign them deliberately. I don't want them to have like the whole program at home, because then it's not connecting with what I want to teach. So with, for example, for our math concepts, if I'm teaching shapes for, the next month, then I will only assign on the computer program shapes and have that sent for homework. And then they have the option of doing that also at home. So my students get a variety of the regular conventional homework and then an option to do online stuff. But what I'm noticing in this trip with Michelle, she's using the Curriculate program, and you do have those outliers, for first grade, you do have sometimes those outliers. And I know next year I am getting a student who will be reading at a 4th grade level. And so what I want to do for her is start putting in the books for Curriculate for her as her reading homework instead of, just the regular reading that she can do. And I want to start picking the books for her and doing author studies and having her really comprehend that knowledge. So it's really out there on what you can do. But I do a mix of it. I do some online, and then they have to turn in. The mandatory homework is the regular packet.
Okay, another question is, and I think you answered that question, but there's some teachers that are asking it. You're self-contained until 6th grade, right? So you're departmentalized 7th grade and 8th grade. Okay, so that's, and then one question is, how do you do team teaching? And in the 7th and 8th grade, how you coordinate with your fellow teachers to make sure that you have a kind of like a cohesive approach to blended learning? Because here in the elementary school, they do have different teachers for different subject matters. So, so one of the questions is how, and maybe more you can answer that question, is how you coordinate in order to make it cohesive and make it work.
Well, I pick my activities for language arts, and my partner picks his activities for math. Because he's on con, so he assigns the things he wants them to solve, and I assign my things for language arts. We do have a little bit of interaction, like the science projects. We were both on Google Drive with the kids on those activities, so we do interactive things together, but it's fairly independent.
But I mean the 1st graders, 2nd graders, we don't have self-contained. So do you need team teaching? Do you need help in the classroom? Especially when you're starting this system.
I have a TA, which she's not a credentialed teacher, but she is in the room with me. There are days that she's not there, and I do it just by myself, and I've learned how to train the students also on independent activities and what those also look like. I've also had a TA that wasn't as good and couldn't couldn't teach the center. So in that model, I either figured out how to split my class, or I trained the kids on independent activities that they could do. Like in math, they did a lot of manipulative work, or if I needed them to learn some fact memorization, that was the place to do that. And then in reading, it was partner reading activities with questions that they could answer together. As long as, for me, that independent center just had to have some student accountability with it. So as long as there was some student accountability with it, then I was okay. But I do it both ways.
Yeah, and going back to homework, one of the things that they don't have in many other of the homes is computers. So here the kids are going to have everyone is going to have a computer, especially from third grade on. They're going to take home the computer, so there's more flexibility in terms of homework. If you're going to do paper homework, or you're going to assign, like Maria Jose, for example, has already been assigning some things online to practice, so that could be done even more with more fidelity. And in terms of teaching assistant, most of the schools that we're working on, they don't have. Yeah. They have 30 kids and no teacher assistant. Yeah.
We've been for 4 years, and I have an aide that came in this January. But that's the first experience I've had with a second adult in the classroom. So that was like a new experience for me, and I was doing this with just me. It's nice to have somebody, but it's only been since January, and it's completely, especially it's completely doable. And I will say I started off just breaking into two. It was just easiest for me to wrap my mind around, was just two different groups, and then I got wild as time went on, and I was more comfortable. But you don't need an assistant or an associate. It's workable.